Welcome to the Global Fintech Fest 2021 podcast series brought to you by IAMAI and India Fintech Diaries. In today's episode, we speak with Gaurav Johri, Senior Advisor, Trade and Investment at Australian Trade and Investment Commission, Austrade, and Abhinav Pathak, Investment Advisor at the Swiss Business Hub, India. Our first guest, Gaurav Johri, works with Austrade as a Senior Advisor to Australian and international businesses in the digital technology and professional services sectors that are looking to drive their growth across borders. He has significant experience as a financial analyst in the fintech and banking sectors and has undertaken transaction structuring, deal execution, risk management, and strategy development for corporates from diverse sectors, including industrials, retail, manufacturing, and conglomerates. Our second guest, Abhinav Pathak, who works with the Swiss Business Hub, the India-based representation of the Swiss Federal Trade and Investment Promotion Agency, Switzerland Global Enterprises or SGE. SGE is responsible for implementing Swiss export promotion strategies and for promoting Switzerland as a highly attractive business and investment location for Indian companies that are looking for growth in European markets. Abhinav has had stints with the government of Telangana and with Bank of America and prior roles. He's passionate about emerging technologies including fintech, blockchain, AI, and digital. We talked with Gaurav and Abhinav about how Indian fintech can successfully become global and grow beyond Indian borders. Hello and welcome back to India Fintech Diaries. I'm your co-host Elroy. As you're aware, right now we are running a special podcast series in collaboration with the Global Fintech Festival 2021, India's largest fintech conference. So Hemant, shall we get started with today's episode?
Absolutely, Elroy. In today's episode, we move our discussion towards enabling the flow of fintech innovation across borders. Fintech has resulted in the creation of innovative business models and solutions in nearly every country. As these fintech firms have grown, they've harbored the desire to take their well-tested offerings beyond their country borders to other countries. Though, Elroy, actually, this path is no cakewalk because each country, ecosystem, culture, policies, and regulations are a mystery in itself. And today, what we try to demystify it for two of the countries, Australia and Switzerland. From Australia, we have with us Gaurav Johri, Senior Advisor, Trade and Investment at Australian Trade and Investment Commission. Welcome, Gaurav.
Thank you.
And from Switzerland, we have Abhinav Pathak, Investment Advisor at Swiss Business Hub, India. Welcome, Abhinav. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Hemant. I'm good. Thank you so much.
Gaurav and Abhinav, in all our discussions with fintech founders on the global plans, the first question that typically comes up is about the current fintech landscape in the target country and what might be some of the attractive white spaces in the market there that they could kind of exploit. To kick off a discussion, let's start from there. So Abhinav, if you could go first, tell us about the fintech ecosystem and white spaces in Switzerland.
So thanks, Elroy. Let me just kind of quickly give you a brief perspective on the fintech landscape in Switzerland. And as you mentioned, I'll try to touch upon some key attractive fintech sub-segments that Indian fintech companies can target basically. So if you look at the Swiss fintech ecosystem, there are around 400 plus fintech companies in Switzerland. If I have to kind of segregate them in various buckets, that would be like payments, which include something like mobile payment solutions, followed by deposit and lending, where we can have something like crowdfunding platforms. Then we can have investment management, which includes robo-advisory services. And the fourth bucket I can think of is banking infrastructure, which is basically the exchanges for crypto assets. So if you look at those four buckets and you look at the strength of Switzerland, then Switzerland's strength lies in the last two, which is primarily the investment management as well as banking infrastructure. The trend that we are seeing, Hemant and Gaurav, is even if from a deal perspective side, what we are seeing since last year is that most of the rounds are in excess of something around $20 million. And just like the trend has been in India, even in Switzerland, investors are focusing on later stage and more mature companies. So companies which already have some kind of a working product but need capital to basically scale up, is those kind of companies are getting a lot of traction from investors as well. Again, with respect to a subsector that I can think of where Switzerland is very strong, that is the blockchain ecosystem. So there is something called as a crypto valley in Switzerland, which has around 1,000 plus blockchain companies, which together employs roughly around 5,000 people. And we have 10 unicorns in blockchain, which includes something like Ethereum, Cardano, Cosmos, Tezos, Definity. So all those major crypto companies that you have heard of are primarily based out of the crypto valley in Switzerland. If you look at the specific fintech subsectors where Indian companies has a lot of fitment, and they can kind of come in Switzerland and explore those things, then the first subsector that comes to my mind would be wealth tech. Now, again, wealth tech is something where Switzerland is pretty strong because of the entire ecosystem present in this particular space. We have premium clients, we have fiduciaries, we have trust, family offices, banks, private banking. So, pretty much the entire ecosystem is there. Also, Switzerland has a credibility as a stable country with a stable privacy laws. So, if I can just summarize this particular subsector, I would say something like that: asset management as a space is something which is ripe for disruption. And if you are an Indian wealth tech solution provider, you should definitely evaluate Switzerland. So that's one of the subsector I can think of. Then, of course, blockchain and DLT. Here also the regulations are pretty favorable, and you will get the entire ecosystem. So if you're looking for to build the future of capital markets and you're trying to build a decentralized solution, then Switzerland is a very decentralized country, and you will get pretty much the entire players. We have custodians. If you want to have employees, storage, banking, business partner, so pretty much everything within the DLT space you will get. And then the third subsector I can think of is cybersecurity. Again, I'll keep it short, but because Switzerland is considered a very neutral country, there is a lot of legal certainty and a lot of political stability. There is a high level of privacy protection which comes with a low density of regulation. So if you're a cyber security company operating in India, you should definitely evaluate Switzerland in order to cater to European market. So that would be my quick response to this question.
And Gaurav, Australia has been a preferred destination for Indians for education, tourism, employment. It also has one of the most vibrant and interesting fintech ecosystems, helping pioneer innovations like BNPL. Help us understand the Australian fintech market and attractive white spaces there better.
Thanks, Elroy. So I think just to set the scene, Australia has a very large financial services sector. I think it constitutes roughly 15% of the economy and is a big
Right.
driver of employment in Australia. And over the last 5 years, the fintech sector in Australia has really grown very, very strongly. So I think as at the latest count, we have around 700 fintech companies in Australia. They go across all of the segments, but the biggest segments in Australia are in payments, lending, and big data. But we also have many other companies across the other segments, including insurance, wealth management, regtech, insurtech, and then, of course, blockchain straddles all of those. I think it's also interesting to note that here in Australia, our financial system is very much dominated by a few very large banks and a few very large insurance companies. And then also we have a very large wealth management sector because there is a compulsory retirement savings regime in Australia. And so it's quite interesting to note that not only has the fintech ecosystem grown through the creation of fintech startups and scale-ups, but also the traditional financial sector has also increasingly embraced the utilization of financial technology. So we're starting to see them invest very heavily in developing technology on their own, but they're also now looking to partner with fintech companies and also buy solutions from fintech companies. And so as a result of that, in Australia, we've seen a real mix of fintech companies. And actually, I would say the higher proportion are probably in the B2B space as opposed to the B2C space, largely because the existing financial institutions have quite a good offering in the B2C space. But those fintechs that have succeeded in the B2C space have very much focused on very specific and targeted niches where they can compete with the existing companies. In terms of subsectors that I think are ripe and would be high potential for Indian companies, there's a few that come to mind initially. So the first one I'd probably raise is payments. So Australia has a relatively mature payment sector. Australians have been very early adopters of payments innovation, but just simply through the size of the payment sector, the opportunity is tremendous. And we're seeing the payments chain being disintermediated by new entrants. And so any company that has a solution on the payment space, there's tremendous potential for them in Australia. And also, I would like to note that the Australian government just last week actually have released the results of a review of the payment sector. So we're likely to see more streamlined regulation come on the result of that, which should make it easier for new entrants to navigate the market in Australia. RegTech is also another subsector where we see great opportunity. So to give you a bit of background, in Australia, there was a big government inquiry 2 to 3 years ago that focused on some poor behavior on the part of the banks and financial institutions. And as a result of that, there have been some quite significant regulatory punishments and fines. And so flowing on from that, what we're seeing is all of the financial institutions in Australia are looking for tech solutions that can help them more efficiently and effectively comply with regulation. And so RegTech is really growing very, very quickly in Australia. We're seeing the financial institutions adopt RegTech solutions more. The regulators themselves are looking at technology that they can use in their supervision work. And Australia, surprisingly, maybe for some, it actually ranks third globally in terms of RegTech solutions. Another subsector I think that has great opportunity is around open data and open data analytics. So last year, as of 1st of July of last year, Australia commenced its open banking regime. And so as a result of that, we're seeing all of the banks are now having to share their data. And then new fintechs and traditional financial institutions are being accredited to receive that data, and they're able to innovate using that. And I think one important thing to note is that even though it started in banking in Australia, it's actually envisaged as an economy-wide solution for open data. So it won't just be for the financial sector. It will move across to energy and telecommunications in the future. So I think the opportunity is tremendous in that regard. And there are a few other sectors as well, digital banking platforms, because all of the banks are looking to update their legacy technology. So if you have a platform that provides a good solution for banks, there's a huge opportunity there. Cybersecurity for financial services. There's a huge opportunity. Cyber is only growing in importance with every passing day. And then I touched on very briefly a few other sectors. So insurance. In Australia, we've not seen the insurance sector be disrupted to a great deal. So I think there's a big opportunity for insurtech companies in India who have solutions to bring to Australia. I did touch on earlier also the size of the wealth management sector in Australia. So any solutions in the investment and wealth management space, there's a huge market here in Australia. And then lastly, the blockchain and DLT sector, it straddles all of the subsectors that we've mentioned, but it's growing very fast here in Australia, and there's a lot of appetite for solutions utilizing DLT, and I think it's only very early, but the opportunity is tremendous. So I think that gives you a broad summary of the size and the nature of the opportunity here in Australia.
Thanks, Abhinav and Gaurav. That's really exciting. And Abhinav and Gaurav, just a couple of days back, I was talking to a fintech founder from the UK who was exploring entering the Indian market. He was really perplexed by the complexities of the market. I have seen this happening many a times, and not only with the fintech founders, but with also the investors. So I'm sure it must be a similar feeling for an Indian founder or investor exploring the Australian or Switzerland markets. Can you help our listeners understand the support offered by the country's government to help them? Gaurav, how about we start with Australia first?
Sure. Thank you. So yeah, it's it's always difficult to enter into a new market and navigate the regulatory environment. But I think, uh, generally speaking, Australia, compared to other countries, the market entry is relatively smooth compared to other markets, and there are various ways that the government is able to support an Indian company that would be looking to enter Australia. So I think, firstly, I would start at the level of the regulators. So our regulators here in Australia, they're very much focused on maintaining market integrity, but they're also looking to bring competition into the market. And so there are some mechanisms that are available to new entrants that I'd like to mention today. So, firstly, we have a regulatory sandbox here in Australia. So, you can test your product before you have to go through the full licensing regime. So, that's a great opportunity for new entrants to utilize. Our main corporate regulator, the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, they run the regulatory sandbox and they take quite a pragmatic approach, and they will work with you to determine whether the activity or service that you're looking to provide fits within the parameters of the sandbox, and then they will let you utilize the sandbox if you meet the criteria. The same regulator also has an innovation hub. So that's actually very much focused on fintech, regtech companies and new entrants into the market. And what they do is they give you informal guidance around navigating regulation in Australia, how to navigate the market and some of the steps you need to go through and who you should speak to. So that's a great lever for you to utilize. Then, given I'm here on behalf of the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, it would be remiss of me not to mention what we do at Austrade. So our role is to help international companies enter Australia and also help Australian companies access international markets. So we at Austrade are able to help you navigate entering the market in Australia. We can provide you advice on the regulatory environment. We can give you connections into people in the local market. As you mentioned earlier, there's a very large Indian community in Australia who would no doubt be keen to help you. But we also have a number of industry associations that cover all of the key subsectors. So to give you an example, there's FinTech Australia, we have a RegTech Association, we have an InsurTech Association, we have a Blockchain Australia Industry Association. So we can introduce you to key partners in those associations as well. Beyond that, there are also regional state governments we have here in Australia. So once you've gotten a little bit more advanced in terms of your thinking of setting up in Australia, those governments can help you in terms of deciding which location you actually want to set up your office. And then once you're set up here in Australia, there are also various government programs that can assist you in terms of helping you grow your business. For example, once you're set up here in Australia, we also have a tax incentive to support research and development. So if you're coming to Australia and you're looking to do some product development and really build on your software solution, there are some grants and other programs that can really help you grow your business.
Abhinav, would you like to go next and quickly give us an overview of what's happening in Switzerland?
Yeah, sure. I'll quickly touch upon three aspects. Primarily, if you are an Indian company and you're looking to go to Switzerland, what is it that we offer? Then I will delve quickly into specifically for fintech, what is the value proposition in Switzerland? And then I would like to highlight as to how can Swiss Business Hub India support you. So coming on the first aspect, irrespective of whichever sector you operate in, pretty much the regulatory norms, the regulations are pretty smooth. So you don't need to have a minimum capital to set up a company in Switzerland. There is no such requirement. You don't need a Swiss co-founder or a Swiss director as well. So that is also not a problem for any Indian company who wants to set up a subsidiary or set up an entity in Switzerland. With respect to taxation, Switzerland offers a very competitive taxation for around two-thirds of the cantons. The taxation ranges from 12 to 15%. It is a range because for every canton, the canton is synonymous to state as we have here in India. So for all cantons have their own taxation, which ranges from 12 to 15%, all inclusive. Then, if you want to hire anybody in Europe, European Union, which includes UK, because Switzerland has a treaty of free movement of people with UK as well. So all those people whom you have across various countries in European Union, you just map that person to the Swiss entity, and it will be considered as local employment. Also, with respect to social security cost, that is also one thing that Indian companies who are evaluating Europe should evaluate. Even in that respect, Switzerland has among the most competitive social security cost as well. So basically, if I have to summarize this, all these aspects, it would be something like that. If you're looking for a lean structure which can cater to entire European market, then you can evaluate Switzerland, and it will be very well positioned. Now, coming to the second part, which is more in terms of regulatory, which Gaurav also highlighted, was with respect to the fintech license or the sandbox thing. What we call it in Switzerland is banking license light. So, if you're a company, you can accept deposit for less than 100 million Swiss franc in case you do not invest the accepted funds and you don't pay interest. So this exemption, this sandbox exemption, is designed to create a regulatory safe harbor where fintech companies can test their business ideas and certain financial services without becoming a regulated entity under Swiss banking regulation. Apart from that, with respect to blockchain, so that is also another field where Switzerland is has done remarkable developments over the years, and this has been a trend which is not new. We were the first ones which who kind of removed the barriers to entry in fintech way back in 2016. We came up with a regulatory sandbox in 2017. ICO guidelines Switzerland announced in 2017. So we kind of categorized how to define payment, asset, and utility tokens, but that was done by FINMA. And in 2019, I recollect that we granted banking as well as securities dealer license to two companies. So we have Signum Banks and Seba Banks only focused for digital assets. Even Six Digital Exchange, which is a subsidiary of Swiss Stock Exchange, has built a fully regulated trading, settlement, and custody infrastructure. So that is the kind of work that has been done in this particular space. If you are an Indian fintech company and you want to kind of partner with some incubators and accelerators, then we have for blockchain, we have something like CV Labs, which have their own incubation programs where they facilitate matchmaking between startups and experts. Also, if you follow us on LinkedIn, our LinkedIn page of Swiss Business Hub India, we every year announce a kickstart innovation program, which is for late stage startups who are ready to collaborate with corporations. So if you are an Indian late stage fintech startup who's looking to access to experts, corporation, potential funding, and infrastructure support, you can get enrolled for the Kickstart program as well. So that is with respect to fintech specific ecosystem. And if I have to kind of quickly highlight as to what is the support that Swiss Business Hub India can provide, so we can offer you all kind of support with respect to site selection, company incorporation, if you're looking for shared office spaces, work permit support, if you want to do R&D and you want to collaborate with academic and research institution in Switzerland. So all that support we can provide to Indian companies who are looking to set up an entity in Switzerland. So yeah, that's a bit with respect to support from my side.
Understood. So those are some very good steps that both of you highlighted that will definitely help Indian founders and investors land softly in Australia and Switzerland. Now, just like how Indian entrepreneurs find new markets a bit daunting at first, I'm sure in the same way, entrepreneurs in your respective countries must be finding the Indian market an enigma. Mainly because this is not just an homogeneous market like some of the other markets are, but in reality, it's actually several different markets masquerading as one. So, from your experience, Gaurav and Abhinav, what are some of the typical challenges that you've heard founders and investors from Australia and Switzerland face while entering the Indian market? Maybe Gaurav, you could go first.
Thanks, Elroy. Yeah. So I think in terms of challenges of entering India, I think the first thing is just the nature of the market is different to Australia. So obviously, as you mentioned, just a different size and scale. And also, as you mentioned, uh, you know, just many markets, some of the big metros in India are the size of the population of Australia. So I think Australian businesses coming to India, just understanding the market dynamics to begin with, is something that they look to do, and it takes a bit of time for them to understand. But then also, it's really about getting that first discussion and getting that first client, I think, can be quite difficult because, entering the market without connections is always very difficult. And so it really requires them to be very patient and to develop connections with the right people, find the right partners in India to help them with their market entry. Of course, regulation, anything in the financial sector, given it's such a highly regulated sector, that's always one that requires some time and effort to navigate appropriately and ensure you have the right licenses and that you're going through the process in a fashion that's as speedy as possible. So I think, for Australian companies to enter India, really what they need to do is they really need to be persistent, number one. Two, I think finding the right people to work with, whether they're advisors, partners, or clients. And then thirdly, I think patience is key. You cannot necessarily do it quickly. And I think the Australian companies, when they're entering India, they really do understand that it's not something where they can snap their fingers and successfully enter the market. It's one that requires a significant investment of time and will mean that it will take some time for them, but the opportunity is tremendous and it really is worth the investment.
And Abhinav, from your experience, what have you heard from entrepreneurs looking to enter India?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Gaurav's analysis and insights on this particular thing. And I understand that fintech is a very sensitive sector. But one of the biggest challenge that we face is the regulatory uncertainty. So that is something that if there is a bit of predictability in that regard, then that would be very helpful. Of course, market challenge is also something that is there for young fintech Swiss company with limited clientele. It is extremely difficult to secure clients in India. And of course, India is a very price sensitive market as well. So that creating that perception for by a Swiss company for value is also becomes extremely critical. So this is something which we consistently based on our discussions with Swiss fintech companies, we have always seen this. Of course, there is a lot of cultural challenges as well. So there's a lot of bureaucracy and hierarchy, which also leads to a longer sales cycle. That is also a issue of concern that companies kind of frequently tell us. And there are some companies in India which are extremely digitized, and then there are some companies which are still on legacy system. So standardization is also one thing that I can add with respect to challenges that Swiss fintech companies traditionally tell us that they face while entering India. So yeah, that's a bit from my side.
So, Gaurav, Abhinav, given these issues that you highlighted, right? If there was the one thing on your wish list that you wish that the Indian ecosystem, policymakers, and government could do to solve some of these problems, what would that be? The question is open to either one of you to answer.
Okay, I'm happy to start with that and take that. So I think for me, I think the key is just more person-to-person links. So enabling better dialogue between the two ecosystems on one hand. So whether a soft landing through hubs, partners, and things like that.
Right.
Also, I think it would be great if regulators are able to engage directly with new entrants into the market. I know some jurisdictions are different to others. Some jurisdictions, the regulators are willing to engage directly with new entrants, whereas others tend to take a little bit more of a arm's length approach. So I think, just enabling more knowledge transfer through person-to-person dialogue.
Abhinav, your views on that?
So yeah, I would like to say that first of all, there is a lot of good work that has also happened, and a lot of good step that Indian policymakers have taken, especially around the payment part. So a lot of credit goes to Indian policymakers for the kind of work that has happened in last like 4 or 5 years that I have seen in India. But as Gaurav mentioned about the soft landing and the regulators directly interacting to companies, some kind of a matchmaking that can happen between large companies and young startups. One thing that I can just think of top of my mind is something like a regulatory sandbox, something like that Gaurav also mentioned that has there in Australia, which is also there in Switzerland. That is something like if we have a regulatory sandbox across subsectors within fintech, then that can also help in unleashing the kind of the animal spirit of fintech entrepreneurs across subsectors within fintech, and that will kind of put us into a different league altogether. So that would be my only like 2 cents with respect to policy making in this space.
Interesting, Abhinav. So there's been an very interesting discussion so far, and we've discussed a lot of challenges, issues. So let's try and end this a little bit more on an optimistic note. Could each of you share one story, each of a successful passporting or of an fintech company, say from your respective countries to India or vice versa? Maybe Abhinav, you could go first,
So I would like to just highlight this particular thing that Switzerland has a very diverse access to untapped investor pool of capital,
right?
specifically from pension funds, and we are seeing that those that is also flowing into Indian capital markets as well. So that is one space, especially specifically with respect to family offices, where Switzerland is very strong. So that is also a source of capital that Indian companies should evaluate to. Why I am saying this is that we frequently come across these examples of Indian fintech companies who kind of have that support from family offices in Switzerland. And there are multiple examples of Indian companies who have come to Switzerland and have done extremely well. There are multiple examples that I can cite, but the one that is on top of my mind is a company, Enterprise Bot, which is based out of the F10 accelerator. It's a very young company, it's just 2.5 or 3 years old company. And within first year of coming to Switzerland, they came through this F10 accelerator program, and they got clients which include generally PwC, Swiss Stock Exchange, Suica, and now they are at a point uh, where they are expanding to other markets. They have a huge team. They have 75 employees now. So those are the kind of opportunities that are available in Switzerland ecosystem, both in terms of getting clientele and access to diverse and untapped investor pools as well. So those are the things I would want to highlight.
And Gaurav, something that you'd like to share as well?
Sure, thanks. If I'm being honest, I think actually that the flows between Australia and India have probably not lived up to their potential. I think there's tremendous opportunity for future growth. Really, I do. But I can share some examples both ways. So outbound from Australia and also inbound to Australia. So there's an Australian company called Link Market Services, who in India have a big operation under the brand of Link in Time, and they provide corporate registry services in India. They have a
Right.
very large team, hundreds of staff in India in multiple locations, and they're actually an Australian company. So they've been a tremendous success in India. And then also more recently, actually, in the very new space of BNPL, which I'm sure all of you know that Australia is actually quite famous for being a hotbed of innovation. I think there's a great fit with the youthful demographic in India and the growth of the younger generations who really are the prime users of BNPL services. I know many of the Australian BNPL companies are actually looking at India as we speak. And I think the opportunity on that side is tremendous. So I would expect in the upcoming period, we will hear of Australian BNPL companies entering into India, whether directly or through partnerships in India. Then on the inward side, I think probably the biggest success story has been all of the large Indian tech conglomerates, you know, the Infosys, the HCL, the Wipros of the world. They've been in Australia since the 1990s, and their technology is all over the financial services sector in Australia. You will not be able to find a bank, an insurance company, anyone in the financial services sector that would not use a solution or have some part of their infrastructure that is underpinned by solutions from one of those big companies. So I think they've been a tremendous success. You know, most of them would have over 1,000 staff each in Australia, and they're really at the cutting edge of technology in Australia. And then more recently, we've been working with NPCI. We're looking to enter Australia. We've touched on a couple of times in today's podcast. You know, there is big linkages between India and Australia through the NRIs in Australia, B, the students, and then also, you know, if we weren't in a pandemic, the very fast growing tourism channels between Australia and India. And so NPCI are looking to enter Australia. They're looking to get acceptance of the RuPay card. They're also looking for UPI acceptance in Australia, and also growing the remittance channels between the two countries. So that's something that I expect to grow, especially once the borders start to reopen and we see those person to person, country to country flows recommence. I expect that to be a tremendous story once that is bedded down and comes to fruition.
Awesome, Gaurav. And Gaurav, you're absolutely correct on BNPL. In fact, the Indian BNPL market is growing like crazy. In fact, we did a dedicated series of podcasts on BNPL within the country. So, Gaurav and Abhinav, this has been an excellent discussion. We have really got to know about Australian and Switzerland markets, fintech markets even better. And we really enjoyed the conversations. And I'm sure that our listeners also now have a good understanding of the Australian and Swiss markets and the support offered. And if they want to know more about this, how can they get in touch with you or your organizations?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I've had a blast today. It's been really a very fun conversation. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would say for anyone that's interested in Australia, please visit the Austrade website. That's www.austrade.gov.au. You'll find information on the fintech sector in Australia. We also have a team on the ground in India. We have 6 offices in India. We've got staff in all of the 4 large metros. They are our sector specialists, and they can work with you as you consider what you could do in Australia. So please go to the Austrade website, and then we are more than happy to support you to do with anything that you're looking to do in Australia. So thank you.
Thanks, Gaurav. And Abhinav, how about Switzerland? How can they do that?
Yeah, so first of all, it's been an absolute pleasure, Hemant and Elroy, to be part of this podcast. And if anybody wants to kind of evaluate Switzerland and wants to get in touch with us, they can write to us on our website, which is Swiss Business Hub India. You can just do a Google search, you will lead to the website. You can also connect to the Swiss Embassy in India. We are headquartered out of the Consulate General in Switzerland in Mumbai, and we are also based in Swiss Embassy in Delhi. So whichever way you can reach out to us. You can also drop us a message on our LinkedIn page, which is Swiss Business Hub India, or to my personal profile as well. So there are multiple ways to reach out to us as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Gaurav and Abhinav. That's it from India Fintech Diaries this week. Thank you for joining this Global Fintech Fest 2021 podcast series brought to you by IAMAI and India Fintech Diaries. If you haven't yet registered for the Global Fintech Festival, please go to globalfintechfest.com and do register. We promise it's going to be an exciting and interesting event that covers all things that are Indian fintech and more. Until next time, stay safe. Thank you.